Well, I've gone into many a prison. Particularly in the first weeks, I was popping up in prisons all over the place. And to this day, I actually get out as often as I can. I will tell you, I've been out in a prison within the last 3 or 4 days, and I can tell you before the next week has passed, I'll probably hit 4 or 5 more. So I've met a lot of the leadership, but I've also talked with and met with a lot of the inmates. And I've tried to go really where a whole range is seen. So you see the older inmates, some suffering from Alzheimer's. You may not think of Alzheimer's patients in prisons, but we have them. I certainly have visited with the inmates that suffer from a mental illness problem. In fact, I've tried to make sure I see the worst of the worst on that to see what we're doing about that. I've met the most hardened people that are going to be with us for a lifetime. Certainly I've been to death row, not to mention the executions. And everything in between, men, women, young, old, firm, infirm, smart, not so smart, healthy, not so healthy. I'm always fascinated.
Excuse me.
That's right. I'm always fascinated by the sort of range of human nature that you see, even amongst inmates. If you ask me, the most poignant events probably with those that have a mental health problem. I recently had a conversation with a man who couldn't be more severe in his mental health issues, and part of his discussion with me, he was actually complaining about being bored. Well, he's in prison for life, he's under a constant watch, he's unsafe to himself, so he doesn't have a lot of things to occupy his time with. So I said, "Don't you read?" And he said, "Yes, I read." I said, "Well, what are you reading?" He said, "I'm reading the Bible." I said, "Well, where's your Bible?" And he went over to the mattress he had in the cell, and he pulled it out from under the mattress. "Here." I said, "Well, what have you read lately?" He said, 1 Peter. I said, "Well, what'd you read in 1 Peter?" He cited me a whole verse. Now, there's a man in prison for life, mentally ill, and he did an excellent job of reciting that verse. And he was very coherent. In fact, I asked him, "And what did you read before that?" And he told me that one. He recited that verse too. So there's a sort of an interesting case. By the way, a few cells up from him was another inmate who perpetually hurts himself. And so he saw me and said, "Are you from Tallahassee?" I said, "Yes." Of course, that means a lot to an inmate. He said, "Well, I want you to change things." And he began to verbalize to me very clearly the things he wanted me to change. And so I listened for a minute or two and said, "I want you to change things too." And he stopped and said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I want you to stop hurting yourself." And he said, "Well, I can't do that." And we then got into a negotiation that if he wanted me to change things, he has to change things. What struck me is how straightforward he was in saying, "I can't stop." At the end of the day, we bargained for 5 days. So we're now, at the moment of this interview, in the 4th day of his deal not to hurt himself. He did promise he wouldn't hurt himself. If he doesn't hurt himself for another day, he gets to write me a letter, and I promise to read his letter. In his letter, he'll tell me what he wants changed. And then maybe we'll go back and we'll bargain some more. So these are sort of the interesting stories you see when you deal with the inmates. The large reflection, look, they are human beings. And as such, we have an obligation to treat them as human beings.